They laughed at her because no one believed a woman like Sarah Brennan could ever be chosen. In Pine Ridge, Montana, laughter was sharp and mean, and it followed her everywhere. It followed her down the dusty trail each morning, followed the bend of her shoulders, and followed the quiet way she kept her eyes lowered, as if trying to disappear into the ground beneath her worn boots. The sun burned the land without mercy that summer, turning the earth into cracked plates of dust. Sarah walked the long path from the creek with 2 heavy wooden buckets, one in each hand. The weight pulled at her arms until her fingers burned and her back ached. At 27, her face already showed lines carved by work and worry. In her family's cabin, she was not treated like a daughter, but like an unpaid hand. She rose before dawn, worked until dark, and still heard that she was useless. The neighbors called her an old maid, a woman past her time, a burden no one wanted. Her mother never hid her disappointment. Every mistake was proof that Sarah was worthless. Every sigh reminded her she took up space better given to someone else. Sarah learned to endure in silence. She learned that hope only made pain worse. That morning, the buckets felt heavier than usual. Sarah stopped beneath a thin pine tree and rested her arms, breathing hard. That was when she heard hoofbeats on the trail. She looked up, startled, and saw a man riding toward her on a strong bay horse. He was around 30, with sun-dark skin and a thick beard. His clothes were plain, buckskin trousers, a cotton shirt, and a wide felt hat pulled low. He slowed his horse and dismounted without hurry. His voice was calm and steady. He asked if he could help. Sarah shook her head out of habit, but he had already reached for the buckets. He lifted them easily, as if they weighed nothing. She felt embarrassment rise in her chest, followed by confusion. Men did not help her. They looked through her or laughed behind her back. They walked together toward the settlement. He asked where she lived. She answered softly. He introduced himself as Daniel Blackwood and said he worked as foreman at the Thornton Ranch. Sarah knew the name. Marcus Thornton owned more land than anyone for miles and ruled it with strict order. Working for him meant steady pay, but also hard demands. Daniel carried the buckets all the way to her family's cabin. When he set them down, he looked at her with a simple smile and thanked her for the walk. When he said her name, it felt different, as if it mattered. That afternoon, Sarah could not focus on her chores. His kindness stayed with her like warmth on cold skin. When she mentioned the meeting to her mother, the reaction was swift and sharp. A man helping a woman always wanted something, her mother warned. Sarah was told to keep her distance and remember her place. But the days that followed changed her routine in ways she did not expect. Each time Sarah walked to the creek or the trading post, she met Daniel on the trail. He helped with firewood. He carried her baskets. He spoke to her like she was worth listening to. He asked about her life, her thoughts, her hopes. No one had done that before. Sarah learned that Daniel was quiet but thoughtful. He spoke of books and places beyond Pine Ridge. He never mocked her for not knowing how to read well. He listened when she spoke, really listened. The attention felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice, but it also felt like air, after years of holding her breath. The settlement noticed. Whispering began on porches and at the general store. Women shook their heads in pretended concern while enjoying the talk. Why would a man like that look twice at Sarah Brennan, they asked. Some said it must be pity. Others said desperation. The whispers reached Sarah's home one afternoon when neighbors arrived with false smiles and sharp questions. Sarah walked in carrying wet laundry and heard her name spoken with judgment. Her mother's anger filled the room. Accusations came fast and loud. Sarah tried to explain, but fear made her voice small. Then came the slap. It echoed off the walls and burned her cheek. The shame hurt more than the pain. Her mother accused her of disgrace and foolish dreams. Sarah stood trembling, tears falling, knowing she had no defense. At that moment, a sound came from the doorway, a quiet clearing of the throat. Daniel stood there, hat in his hands. He had heard enough. His eyes moved to Sarah's face, to the mark on her skin. Something hard settled in his gaze, though his voice stayed calm. He apologized for the intrusion and said he wished to speak with her parents about something important. The room went silent. Even the neighbors stopped breathing. Daniel straightened and spoke clearly. He said he had come to ask for Sarah's hand in marriage. The words fell heavy and unreal. Sarah felt the world tilt. No one spoke. Her mother stared as if turned to stone. The neighbors' faces froze in shock. Daniel said he had steady work and savings. He promised a roof, food, and respect. He said Sarah deserved dignity. When he said that, he looked at her, not her parents. Her father arrived then, tired and wary. He asked simple questions. Could Daniel provide? Could he do things properly? Daniel answered without hesitation. He said Marcus Thornton already knew and had offered a small cabin on the ranch. That changed everything. Her father agreed quickly. Her mother protested weakly. At last they turned to Sarah and asked what she wanted. For the first time, the choice was hers. Sarah looked at Daniel. She did not know him fully. But she knew how he treated her. She knew how he made her feel seen. She said yes. And as the neighbors began to whisper again, Sarah had no idea that this choice would soon expose a truth far greater than gossip, a truth that would turn laughter into stunned silence and change her life forever. The settlement did not sleep after the announcement. By morning, Pine Ridge buzzed with whispers that grew louder with every retelling. Some said Sarah Brennan had trapped a man out of desperation. Others said Daniel Blackwood must be hiding something. No one believed the story could end well. Sarah felt the weight of every stare as she walked through town, but this time there was something different in her step. Fear was still there, but hope walked beside it. Preparations for the wedding were simple and hurried. There was little money for celebration, and no one expected much. Sarah's mother pulled an old white dress from the bottom of a trunk, yellowed with age and stiff from years of storage. It had been worn once and forgotten. Sarah took it carefully, feeling both gratitude and unease. It was the first time her mother had offered her anything of value, though the warmth behind it felt thin. Daniel spent his days fixing up the small cabin on the back edge of the Thornton Ranch. He worked late into the evenings, repairing the roof, sealing cracks, and making the space as clean and solid as he could. When Sarah saw it for the first time, her breath caught. It was small and plain, but it was hers. For the first time in her life, she would have a place where no one shouted her name in anger. The wedding day arrived under a wide blue sky. It was held in Ezra Wilson's barn, the only space large enough to hold the neighbors who came out of curiosity more than kindness. Wildflowers hung from the beams, and a local fiddler played simple tunes. Sarah walked in on her father's arm, her heart pounding so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. Daniel waited at the front, clean-shaven and wearing his best clothes. When he saw her, his face softened in a way that steadied her shaking hands. The vows were spoken simply. There were no grand promises, only honest ones. When they were pronounced husband and wife, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her, as if the ground beneath her feet had finally stopped shifting. One detail did not go unnoticed. Marcus Thornton himself sat quietly at the back of the barn. He did not speak to anyone, but his presence stirred confusion and curiosity. Why would a man like him attend a foreman's wedding? No one had an answer. That evening, Sarah left her parents' cabin for the last time. The goodbye was short and awkward. Her mother offered stiff words. Her father nodded once. The wagon carried her few belongings toward the ranch as the sun sank low over the hills. Sarah did not look back. Life in the cabin began gently. Daniel rose before dawn and returned at dusk. Sarah tended the house, cooked meals, and planted a small garden. The days were quiet, filled with simple routines. Daniel never raised his voice. He thanked her for every meal. He asked her thoughts and listened to the answers. The marriage was not built on sudden passion. It was built on care, on patience, on the safety of knowing no hand would strike her and no word would be used to tear her down. For Sarah, that was more than she had ever imagined. In town, attitudes shifted. Sarah was no longer pitied. She was watched. The foreman's wife carried a different weight. Some smiled too quickly. Others avoided her eyes. She felt the change and learned to walk with her back straighter, though inside she was still the same woman who once carried water under the burning sun. Months passed, and peace settled in. Then one morning the ranch felt different. Carriages arrived from distant towns. Well-dressed men moved in and out of the big house. Daniel came home tense, his words few and careful. Sarah sensed a storm gathering. He told her Marcus Thornton was ill. Doctors had come from far away. The ranch buzzed with worry. If the old man died, everything would change. No one knew who would take his place. Daniel was called to the big house often. Each time he returned quieter than before. At night, he lay awake, staring into the dark. Sarah wanted to ask questions, but something held her back. She could feel that the answers were heavy ones. One evening, Daniel came home after sunset, his face pale and drawn. He sat at the table and did not speak for a long time. Sarah waited, her chest tight. At last, he told her Marcus Thornton had died that afternoon. Sarah whispered a prayer. Then she asked why Daniel had been called so often. Why him? Daniel looked at her with eyes full of conflict and resolve. He said there was something she needed to know, something he should have told her sooner. He took her hands and held them tightly. He said his full name was Daniel Blackwood Thornton. He said Marcus Thornton was his father. The word struck Sarah like a blow. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. The cabin, the wedding, the rancher's presence, the sudden attention. Daniel explained in a low, steady voice. His mother had worked at the big house years ago. When she became pregnant, she was sent away. She raised him alone. Before she died, she told him the truth and asked him to seek answers, not revenge. Daniel came to the ranch under another name. He worked as foreman to learn the land and the man who had abandoned him. The rancher recognized him. They kept the secret. Shame and pride held the truth in silence. Sarah asked the hardest question of all. She asked if their marriage had been part of the plan. Daniel shook his head. He said meeting her changed everything. He said marrying her was the only choice he made with his heart alone. Then he told her the final truth. Marcus Thornton had named him his sole heir. Sarah could not speak. The meaning settled slowly, the wealth, the land, the power, and with it, a future she never imagined. As night fell over the quiet cabin, Sarah understood that her life had crossed a line she could never step back over. The laughter of Pine Ridge was about to turn into something else entirely. And the world that once crushed her was about to face her again, from a very different place. The truth did not stay quiet for long. By the time Marcus Thornton's funeral was held, the entire territory seemed to know. Carriages lined the long road to the big house, bringing lawyers, distant relatives, and powerful landowners who had never stepped foot in Pine Ridge before. They came dressed in fine coats and practiced expressions of grief, but their eyes searched for opportunity. Sarah stood beside Daniel as he was formally named the rancher's son and sole heir. Murmurs swept through the crowd like a sudden wind. Faces stiffened. Some turned pale. Others smiled too quickly. A few relatives whispered in anger, already feeling cheated of a fortune they believed should have been theirs. Sarah felt every gaze land on her. She wore a simple dress, her hands folded tight, her heart racing. Just months ago, these same people would not have spoken her name. Now they studied her, as if trying to measure her worth. After the funeral, Daniel and Sarah moved into the big house. The change felt unreal. The rooms were wide and tall, filled with furniture brought from faraway places. The floors shone. The curtains were heavy and rich. Servants moved quietly, unsure how to treat the new mistress of the house. That first night, Sarah could not sleep. The bed felt too soft, the ceiling too high. She lay awake, afraid that at any moment someone would tell her a mistake had been made and send her back to the cabin with the dirt floor and thin walls. Daniel sensed her unease. He told her gently that this place was hers now, that she belonged here. She wanted to believe him, but years of being told she was nothing did not disappear overnight. News spread fast. In Pine Ridge, the laughter stopped. In its place came envy, disbelief, and sudden kindness. People who had ignored Sarah now praised her. Women who once whispered behind her back now spoke sweetly to her face. Men tipped their hats lower and longer. Her parents arrived within days. Her mother admired the furniture. Her father spoke proudly of his daughter, as if he had always believed in her. Sarah listened quietly, feeling neither joy nor anger, only a dull ache for the love that had come too late and for the wrong reasons. Wealth changed the way people treated her, but it did not change who Sarah was. She remembered the long walks to the creek, the aching hands, the slap that burned her face. She remembered how it felt to be small and unseen. And she made a choice. Sarah asked Daniel to help her start something new on the ranch. She wanted a small school for the workers and their families, a place where children and adults could learn to read and write. Some laughed at the idea. Others warned it would cause trouble. Daniel supported her without hesitation. Soon, evenings at the ranch filled with quiet voices learning letters by lamplight. Sarah sat among them, learning too. For the first time, she held books without shame. She did not stop there. She improved living conditions for workers, raised wages, and made sure the sick were cared for. Some powerful neighbors disapproved. They said she was forgetting her place. Sarah knew exactly where her place was. It was beside those who had never been given one. One day, a woman arrived at the ranch asking for work. It was one of the same women who had mocked Sarah years earlier. Her life had fallen apart, and she had nowhere else to go. The servants waited to see what Sarah would do. Sarah gave her a job. Not out of weakness, but out of strength. She knew what it meant to be desperate. She knew what it meant to be judged without mercy. Slowly, the territory changed, not because of fear, but because of example. People spoke of the new owners with respect, not just for their wealth, but for their fairness. At night, Sarah and Daniel sat on the porch of the big house, watching the sun sink over the land. Sometimes Sarah thought of the girl she used to be, bent under the weight of water buckets and cruel words. That girl was still part of her, but she was no longer trapped. They had laughed when she married a simple mountain man. They had believed she would always be small. They were wrong. Sarah Brennan did not rise because of fortune alone. She rose because she carried her pain with her and chose to turn it into something better. And in doing so, she became more powerful than anyone in Pine Ridge ever imagined.